Reach Out Your Hand by MC Coy. Chapter 5. The Plan, Part 1. The ball was in full swing at this point, and Denki was elbow deep in sudsy water cleaning off plates, knives and glasses as fast as he could. The kitchen was in complete mayhem, which was fairly normal for an event like this, but a couple of workers suddenly got sick, and so they were short-staffed on top of that. Denki took a step back from the sink when more pots were dumped in by a passing chef, asking if those could be cleaned first. He nodded his head, but waited for the water to settle before he stepped closer again, cursing the staff shortage for forcing him to wear the waiter outfit instead of his usual uniform. The outfit was a slightly nicer quality, with his button-up shirt, vest, pants, and shiny new shoes being pure white. He felt awkward and stiff in it, immediately rolling up the sleeves so he didn't ruin it. He begged Sato not to make him wear it due to him being stationed at the sink all night, but the head chef was persistent that there was a likely chance he would have to make an appearance and needed to look the part. It took 3 pieces of cake for him to finally agree, ultimately wanting to help his friend and ease the burden that was on him tonight, but he still wasn't very happy about it. He didn't want to go out on the floor and be looked at by all those noble people, having to remember to bow to all of them while also making sure no one noticed him swoop in and take their empty plates. It sounded exhausting to him. He tried to complain about it to Jiro and Momo, but neither of them agreed with him. Momo spends most of her time next to Eerie at balls and is more than accustomed to the way of the fancy people. Heck, she basically was one with how polite and sophisticated she was. Jiro just told him that they weren't so bad, and that only one drunk person has ever yelled at her for not playing their favourite song, and the Knights took care of them quickly. That story did nothing to soothe his anxiety, only confirming that there was a chance that someone would yell at him. They tried to soothe his worries again by saying that he would get to see all the dancing and even Hitoshi all dressed up, but that only made him feel worse. He was already having enough trouble trying to will his silly crush away. Seeing the prince in all his royal glory will not help his case at all. Plus, just imagining the prince dancing with someone else, smiling and laughing like he did with him the first night they danced, would break his heart. He can't help that the prince's heart beats for another, but he doesn't wish to put his own heart through any more pain than it has already suffered. It's better this way, he scolded himself as he scrubbed a little harder than necessary at a pot. He will find someone worth dancing with, and then be happy, and that is what matters in the end. What about your happiness? A small voice whispered in his head, and he immediately pushed it away. His mother taught him better than to cave to those kinds of wants. He had a duty and a standard to uphold, and if that meant he had to let the prince go, well, so be it. Easier said than done. Will you shut up? Denki was still mentally arguing with himself when Sero suddenly burst through the door with stacks of dirty plates balancing on his arms. "Dude, it's crazy out there," he yelled as he slowly made his way over to Denki to drop off the new load. "What's happening?" Sato asked, always needing an update on what the food table was running low on. "Well, for one, the dancing has started, so you know that means people just abandon their drinks and stuff," Sarah started to explain, Denki helping him deconstruct the towers he created so they could all safely make it into the sink. "Ah, yeah, but that does usually mean we can slow down," Sato nodded his head, sighing in relief that the hard part of the night was coming to an end. "That's just the thing. Barely anyone is dancing, and they're all asking about the second dessert." "What?" Sato yelled in a panic. "What do you mean they want a second dessert?" "It means everyone knows that trying to get a dance with the prince is hopeless, so they would rather eat and get drunk than try their luck." "You can't be serious right now," Sato groaned in frustration. "I don't have a second dessert prepared." Sero raised his hands as soon as all the plates were gone. "Hey, I'm just the messenger, don't blame me. And I mean, if they already have a partner, then they're still dancing, but, you know." "The majority of the guests are standing by the food table," Sato finished with a sigh, and got a slow nod in return. Sato turned to his staff, looking everyone over before taking another calming breath in. "Okay, we can do this," he mumbled to himself before shouting orders. "Sero, get back out there and take several champagne bottles with you. That has to tie them over until we have something ready for them." "On it," the tall man said with a mock salute already out the door. "We," Sato said, turning back to his team, "will be making pudding. It's fast, easy, and we should have all the ingredients for it." "Yes, chef!" they all yelled, all of them starting to run to get the necessary things for the new dish. don't abandon the actual menu either, Sato added on. This is only to buy us some more time. Oh, and Denki? Don't worry, Sato. I'll get everything clean for the next rush as soon as possible. Sato gave him a sad smile, Denki instantly hating the expression on the others' faces. Though that is very helpful, Sero is drowning out there and I need you to place the clean bowls and spoons on the table, letting the guests know the pudding is on its way. Sato, I can't. On the way back, if you could grab all the spoons you find, that would also be helpful. We never seem to have enough. Sato, Denki yelled again, trying to get the chef's attention. I can't. Yes, you can, Sato said back firmly, pointing to his uniform as he did. We made you wear that for a reason, Denki, and the reason is that we're struggling to keep up with the demand. But who will do the dishes? Denki tried to argue, knowing things will fall apart if no one takes care of the mess of dishes. You still will, Sato assured him. I'm just asking you to go out there once, place the stuff, grab what you can, and then come back here to start washing again. Nothing more, nothing less. But I've never done this before. It's really simple. Just take the clean dish tray to bring the stuff out and place the dirty stuff in. I know you can do this. Though Sato tried to be encouraging, Denki was still hesitant. He really didn't want to go out there, and everyone knew that this was something he wouldn't budge on. Please, Sato begged, looking at him in desperation. Please just help us with this once, and I promise to never ask you to go out there again. You know I wouldn't normally send you out there, but I'm desperate tonight, Denki. Denki bit his lip, looking at how exhausted the team looked and how hard they were trying to keep up while still short on a few hands. He let out a sigh in defeat, knowing his friends needed help outweighed his discomfort. Okay, he mumbled, Sato still letting out a cheer and relief when he did. But only this once, and then I'm never going back out there again. Deal, Sato immediately agrees, already handing Denki the tray with the bowls and spoons on it, along with a new stack of napkins. I owe you one, Denki. Just name the dessert and it's yours. I'll hold you to that, Denki said with a sigh as he positioned the tray comfortably in his hands before heading to the door. Okay, I'm about to head out. This is your last chance to stop me. I'm serious. If you think it's better I stay, then I won't judge you for changing your mind. You'll do great, Denki. I believe in you. Thanks, he mumbled after his last-ditch effort to guilt Sato didn't work. He let out another sigh before trying to mentally hype himself up. You're doing this for your friends. You're doing this for your friends, he chanted to himself, until he felt confident enough to swing the door open and step out of his safe haven and into the fray. His eyes widened in shock, unable to help but stare in awe at all the colours and lights that were bombarding him from all sides. Women with big, elegant dresses were fluttering by as if they were floating. Men in tailored suits stood up straight as they roared in laughter with glasses of champagne in their hands. Purple decorations were thrown everywhere in the form of flowers and flags. Even some of the candles seemed to be enchanted to glow a soft purple. Though it was all so grand, it was the dancing that grabbed his attention, all of the couples working together to dance perfectly in sync. It was like clockwork as they all moved in the same rotation, even switching partners at one point and then starting the dance anew. It was so different from the dancing he saw in the village so long ago, but just as mesmerizing to look at, making his feet itch to join them. Excuse me, a voice suddenly called out to him, making him snap out of his daydream and back to reality. Yes, he stuttered out, gripping the tray in his hands like a lifeline as he turned to see who had spoken to him, and nearly fainted once he recognized who it was. Denki's eyes widened as he looked up and saw the joyful king casually talking to him, his hair down in beautiful braids that helped keep his gold crown in place. Denki went to bow, but remembered at the last second the tray in his hands, having to quickly right his balance to stop the tray from toppling over and spilling everything. The king also seemed to see what was happening, reaching out and helping stabilize the bowls and silverware to ensure nothing fell. Once it seemed the crisis was averted, the king stood up and gave him a gentle smile. I hate to bother such a busy worker, the king said with a playful wink, but my guests seem to be rather hungry this afternoon. Does the head chef Sato know about this? Denki could do nothing but gape like a fish, no words coming out of his mouth as he tried to wrap his head around why the king was talking to him. He swore he heard his mother's voice scolding him in the back of his mind for keeping that man waiting, but he didn't know what to say. I have a huge crush on your son, and I would like to dance with him again. His brain tried, and he let out a squeak of embarrassment. You all right, little listener? The king asked in concern, having heard the squeak. You aren't overworking yourself, are you? Denki quickly shook his head, no, knowing well enough not to complain about his workload, especially to the king. The king didn't seem satisfied, stepping closer to him with his hand outstretched as he gestured to an empty table. Here, why don't you sit down and rest for a moment? It's important to take breaks, after all. Too close, Denki thought, as the king took another step towards him, making him immediately backpedal to ensure the appropriate amount of room was between them. Pudding! Sato! Pudding! He squeaked out, nodding his head in a small bow before making a beeline to the food table. It was probably rude to leave the king's presence too suddenly, but Denki didn't care at the moment, needing to leave before he actually did something rude and unforgivable. He was too busy running away to see the sad expression on the joyful king's face, his eyes immediately searching out his husband that was still on the throne and throwing his hands up in defeat. The serious king just raised an eyebrow at him, silently communicating a look that screamed, I told you so. I was just trying to help, Hisashi glared back. This is why we don't tell you things, Shota communicated with an eye roll. You meddle too much. I meddle just the right amount. At least I'm trying to help, Hisashi said with a foot stomp back. Let's just hope Hitoshi's plan is better than yours. Shota turned away from its husband to look at where his son was leaning against a pillar on the far side of the room, looking as bored as ever, but his calculating eyes scanning the crowd every few seconds. I really hope his plan goes better, Shota thought with a sigh, not wanting to see history repeat itself. Back over to Denki, the blonde had just made it over to the food table and was quickly placing all of the new bowls and spoons in their designated area. He just kept repeating the word pudding when anyone asked him a question, fortunately answering most of the guests' questions and then leaving him alone. He had just placed the last piece of silverware and was now looking for an empty table to clean up when he spotted Sero pouring more champagne for some guests. His friend smiled at seeing him and gave him a thumbs up in encouragement. He gave a shaky smile back in return, silently communicating that he really doesn't want to be here, and got a snort of laugh in return. Why do all my friends lack sympathy? Denki thought bitterly, before noticing a shock of purple that was just beyond his friend's shoulder. He leaned to the side to get a better look before he could think better of it, and was soon granted a perfect view of the prince across the dance floor. He let out a gasp in shock, immediately wanting to duck and hide, but something stopped him from doing so. He took in the prince's combed-back hair, much more tamed than when he last saw it, and even having one side of his head braided like the king. His silver crown fit snugly against his head and went perfectly with his black suit with silver accents. Silver stitching that looked like ivory decorated his coat, and small purple jewels acted as his cufflinks. Silver chains kept the coat from flying open, but left just enough room for Denki to see the matching black button-up he wore under it. He looked handsome, stunning even, and in every way a prince. Denki felt his heart beat faster just at the sight of him, unable to help himself but think that he looked like the moonlight if it was a person. He turned away, unable to look at him any longer in fear that he would start to run to him. This wasn't the time or the place for such foolishness, and he should hurry up and finish the task so that he could go back to the safety the kitchen gave him. A melody started to play in his head, the one that had been haunting him in his dreams and only showed up when he was around. No, it can't be, Denki thought as he chanced another look at and saw the prince was looking directly at him. He let out a gasp, unsure if it was in shock at how much louder the music sounded in his head or if it was from the blinding smile the prince was openly giving him. Denki felt frozen in place as he watched the prince quickly stand from his leaning position and waved his arm frantically in the air, seeming to signal something to the orchestra. Jiro instantly stood up from a chair, starting a new song even though they were in the middle of a different one. She glared at the other musicians until they conceded and started to play with her. Denki covered his mouth with his hand, suddenly hearing the song that has been playing in his head non-stop out loud. He looked back at the prince in pure shock, watching as he started to take measured steps towards him, his arms stretched out with his palm up, taking a bow for all to see as he silently asked for a dance. Denki felt tears in his eyes, his breathing coming out quickly as he tried to understand what was going on. Surely the prince wasn't asking him to dance, especially in front of all these people. He looked from the prince to the band and then towards the murmuring crowd, wondering what he should do. Go to him, his brain screamed at him, but he couldn't move. It wasn't right. He just didn't understand. Why would the prince want to dance with him when he had his pick of everyone in this room? Does it matter? His brain tried again. He's asking for a dance, and who are you to deny him it? You're right, Denki mumbled to himself, lowering his hand from his mouth and giving the prince a shaky smile. It was his duty to serve the royal family, and if that included dancing with the prince in a room full of people, then so be it. He will do it for him. And for yourself. With his mind made up, Denki let out a shaky breath before reaching his own hand out to him to accept his offer. The prince instantly straightened, his smile somehow bigger as he took quick strides to meet him, though he only got halfway before a beautiful blonde man stepped out in front of him, bowing back to the prince and quickly taking fast steps to meet him in the middle. Denki's heart stopped as the two joined hands, the elegant blonde wearing a flirtatious smile as he began to spin the prince for all to see. Oh, of course the prince wasn't asking to dance with him. How could he have been so stupid? He's a prince. Of course he wanted to dance with a pretty boy with light blonde hair and baby blue eyes. Of course this was the guy the prince has been wanting to dance with this entire time, and he was foolish enough to forget that. To forget his place. He couldn't watch the happy couple dance even if he wanted to. His eyes filled up with too many tears for him to see clearly. He couldn't take it. He couldn't stand there any longer, not when the only person he wanted to dance with was dancing to their song with someone else. Denki didn't look back as he turned and ran, no longer caring about staying invisible as he pushed past people to get back to the kitchen. He needs out. He needs to get away from everything. He didn't even realize he had burst into the kitchen until he suddenly looked up and saw several pairs of concerned eyes looking back at him. Denki! Sato yelled from his station in concern, quickly wiping his hands to look the other over. What happened? Are you okay? Denki just let out a squeak, suddenly feeling embarrassed for coming back there in such a state. Denki! Wait, buddy, come back! Denki turned to see through the swinging doors, Sero and Momo running after him, both of them looking concerned. He suddenly started feeling overwhelmed by how many people calling him and not having any way to explain what he was feeling at the moment. He felt like a coward, unable to face the truth that he knew from the start, but he just couldn't deal with it right now. I'm sorry, he mumbled before pushing past Sato and sprinting out the back door, just able to hear his friends barge through the door as he slipped around the corner. He didn't know where he was running to, but he knew he needed to hide. He needed the place to be alone to think. He will apologize to Sato and everyone tomorrow when he was calmed down, but for now, he just needs to get away. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.